Hello, hello, hello. We are live right on time. I'm super excited for today's call. We got people already waiting here. I can see 11 people, it looks like, waiting. Rob's here and Charlie is here. Good to see y'all here. Excited about today's call. If you could, let me know if you can hear everything all right. I'd hate to get too far into this and nobody be able to hear me, but I'm not going to waste too much time this morning on all that. I am going to, however, put my phone on silent because I just got a notification that the admin bar is live. All right, fantastic. Let's dive into this. Like I said, we got a lot to cover here today, so I don't want to waste anybody's time. If you guys have not been following along, this is part 3 of this series. So we already tackled time to first byte, and we tackled largest contentful paint last month. And today we're going to be tackling first contentful paint, or FCP, which that's what we're going to call it from here on out. We're going to be tackling that today. So a couple things before we get started. If you guys aren't familiar with Brian is the co-founder of Perfmatters. He also has a plugin called NovaShare. If you're not familiar with that, you should definitely go check it out. He literally, I love to say this, Brian, he literally wrote the book on how to speed up your WordPress website, which is just a fun thing to say. Brian knows his stuff. He also has a really great newsletter. If you're into reading newsletters, you can go to brianleejackson.com and subscribe for his newsletter that comes out once a month, and it has all kinds of great stuff in it. And just generally, just if you follow Brian around the internet and consume what he's putting out there, then you will be better at building websites, and your websites will be better for it. So I would definitely encourage you to do that. Like I said, we're going to tackle FCP today. Last month when we did LCP, we had several people mention that they were kind of like doing all the steps we were talking about to their website as we were doing it. And I thought that was pretty neat because a lot of people ended up with a faster site by the end of the webinar than when they started it. So a couple caveats to that. If you're running a really old page builder, or there's a lot of traffic on your website, maybe you don't do a bunch of performance tests in the middle of a live webinar on live traffic. But if it's your agency site, you don't get a bunch of traffic, it's not a client thing, I would encourage you to follow along with this. You'll have to, I would say, go run a page speed insights test first, so you can kind of get a benchmark on what your FCP is. Log into your site, make sure you have Perfmatters installed. If you don't have Perfmatters, you can go to perfmatters.io and use the code TheAdminBar, and that'll give you 20% off the plugin. It goes on all of my sites. It's baked into my starter site, so I'd highly encourage you to do that. And then you can just follow us along. At the end of this call, we're going to try to make time for questions and answers. So if you're doing this as we go out throughout the call and run into any issues, you can drop those questions in here, and that way we can try to take care of all those issues here live on the call. And you also don't need to worry about taking any notes during this. We're going to have the replay available. We'll have the slides and any kind of notes next week. All of that will be available. So you'll be able to get all this information. You don't have to take notes or anything like that. Did I miss anything, Brian?
I think that's a pretty good introduction. Yeah.
Whew, okay. Well, I made notes this time, so I didn't forget all the things I needed to say. I don't think I did a good job of that last time. All right. Fantastic. It sounds like people can hear us and everything already. And so I'm going to go ahead and share your screen here, and we can see it, and I'll let you kind of drive the bus, Brian.
All right. Yeah. Let's dive in. Let's see here. So first, Contentful Paint. Let's get here to our next first slide. So first, Contentful Paint defined. So this is measuring the time it takes for the browser to render the first piece of content you see on the page. So this can be text, images, background images, SVG elements, etc. So I think the biggest thing here is not to confuse it with LCP, which we went over last time, which is the main content, or the largest, how long it takes for that to become visible. So here it's literally about the first visual element you see on the page. And so you can kind of see here, we're looking at FCP and see that first slide is when all the visual elements start to appear. And actually, I'm going to show you, or we'll dive into that in the next slide. We'll go into this little granular too, so you can see that. So FCP, it's a notable metric. So it is not one of the core Web Vitals metrics officially that you're going to pass or fail on at the top. Only LCP, INP, and CLS are the ones that you pass or fail on. However, of course, just like time to first byte, FCP, if you don't optimize for these things, your other metrics are going to suffer. So it all kind of comes together to get to that pass or fail at the end. So, but that's why they call it a notable metric instead of an official Core Web Vitals metric. Why is it important? I would probably say that it's one of the most important metrics, even more than LCP in terms of like perceived performance. So like how fast your site feels. And then I have, feedback for the user. Is it loading? So you know that thing when you're on your phone, like you get that little just delay and you're like wondering, is it my Wi-Fi? Is it actually loading? Like FCP really tackles that to signal to the brain that like, okay, it's loading right away, no problems. Because the first visual element is loading as fast as possible. So it's kind of like a signal to the user. So as far as like perceived performance and user experience goes, it's super, super important. So what is a good FCP? So according to Google, they want you to have your FCP under 1.8 seconds. And just like with LCP and other metrics, typically they use the 75th percentile to determine where you stand. So that's like 75% of the visits and crawls need to be in that good threshold for you to get that classification. So you can have outliers, and you probably will when you have spikes, cache expire, all this type of stuff. But they want 75% to be under that 8.8 seconds.
Well, good. I just tested the site I'm going to be trying to do as you're talking today. I'm at 1.9. So we don't got much to do to get me in that good threshold, but I purposely picked a site that was not doing as good as it could be. So
you're close.
Close.
And then, of course, you always want to aim lower because of how Google measures things. They're using a throttled 4G mobile connection to crawl your site. So depending on what tool you're using, where you're running it, like you might think it's fine, but really you need to optimize for the slowest type of connection, just because not everyone in the world has fast internet. And so you really want to optimize for the slowest, and then those fast people will be completely fine. So how to measure FCP? Different tools you can use. A few of my favorites are, of course, PageSpeed Insights. I use a daily basis. I'm running that hundreds of times a day. GTmetrix is a great one. I like how they present a lot of things visually. It's just easy to understand. And then Debugbear is a new one of my favorites that I've been using over the last year or two a lot. The one thing with FCP, though, is web page test is another tool you can use. And the one thing I really like about their tool, and I will bring it over here so you can see, is you can adjust the film strip thumbnail intervals. Let's see here. So you can adjust these here to like large and then the thumbnail intervals. So you can really adjust if you're wanting to fine tune like what's the FCP element or where's that first element coming in. You can really fine tune. And so here it's probably something to do with the menu here, if you can see that even. Yeah. Little things. So, but I like that if you're trying to like see like where the FCP is, you can really go more granular with web page tests. And it's a free tool as well. All these are free, at least some have limits, but they're all free.
I just put all those links inside the chat too. So,
and all these slides do have links as well. So if you're going to the slides later, I do link to the tools just in case. And of course, when you're testing FCP, always test 3 times because of cache, network latency. If you run any speed test in the past, you probably know this already, but never just rely on that first test. It's never going to be super reliable. And then let me pull this back.
Unless that first test is like perfect scores, then just close your browser, walk away. Job done for the day. Okay.
Yeah. Ignorance is bliss in that situation. And then the other, of course, here in PageSpeed Insights is this FCP tab. That's kind of small here, but I use this a lot, of course, and we'll go through here this later in the presentation. But I like to see here's everything pretty much impacting FCP.
Yeah, those little filters are they're handy, and I think you were actually the one that pointed those out to me. Like I never even saw those on the screen before.
Oh, really? Yeah. I'm constantly using those just to see. I mean, because the goal is you really want to get those filters to Bring this back. You really want to get those to drop down into the green.
Right.
So if you technically fix one, it will drop down to green and it will underpass. Now, some of these are just measurements, so you can't always fix all of them, but that's kind of the goal, is to go through and fix them. Okay, and then I want to go over this again. We went over this in LCP, but it's super important because, again, if you miss the filters, I feel like a lot of people are missing this, is the difference between lab data and real user data. So, and this is just an eBay test because it's a good, bad, has lots of errors on it. But so you have the real user data is here at the top, this top section. The lab data is here at the bottom. That's what you're looking at right here. The lab data is the live data. Real user data is what is gathered over like the period of 28 days. And that's what you're passing or failing on. So you're not going to pass or fail on the live data. So when you run a live test, it's great to see like, okay, I'm making progress on my site. Let's keep doing this. It's working. But that doesn't mean you're going to pass the very next day. I get tickets all the time saying like, why am I still failing? And it's because, well, we literally just fixed things on your site. So you have to, yeah, exactly. And so they hide this. I wish they had bigger tooltips here because I think it'd be helpful. But like this tooltip here, you can see says over the last 28 days collection period. So I think this should be like not even behind a tooltip, but and then you have these two tabs here again. Let me maybe see if I can zoom in here. Origin or this URL. And you'll notice here the metrics are changing, and that's because when you're running a speed test, if it has enough data for the individual URL, it will show it. But many, many times you might not have enough data for that URL, so only the origin will be showing, meaning it's just the average data over your entire site. So just
and you'll know because this URL tag is like grayed out. You can't even get to it.
Yep. And so just pay attention when you're looking at the data of what are on those tabs, because you might be looking at your whole site data for real user data instead of just that URL. So it can be very, the data might mean a totally different thing if you're on the wrong tab or looking at something there. Oh, and another tip there would be if you don't have data for this URL and you just have origin and you're saying, great, I'm failing a metric across my whole site. What's the easiest way to find that? Go into Google Search Console and it should have what you're failing on, and you can drill down into, it will spit out all the URLs that are failing for that metric. So if you're seeing that, that's the easiest way to be like, okay, well, what is failing? That's the easiest way to find it, is Google Search Console.
Yeah, Google Search Console is handy too. Like I had a site that I was having trouble with, and I was impatient to wait the 28 days. You can actually request them to like, that you fixed whatever that issue is and try to get them to go run it again. So that did speed things up for me. The other thing I want to mention too is like you might run these tests and not even see a pass or fail. And that could be there's not enough data on your website. And I think it actually tells you on there that there's not enough data for that. But if it's just a low traffic, small business, mom and pop website, there might not be enough traffic for you to get a pass or fail score here on these tests.
Correct. Yeah. We'll just do that really quick to see what it shows so people can see it. While that's running here, we'll bounce over to the next slide. Okay, so yeah, here's an example. So my personal site, brianleejackson.com, I store great on the lab data, but I don't have enough data to the site because I don't really have any content on the site. It's just kind of a standstill. I have like 3 blog posts in the last 5 years on there. So there's no traffic to the site. And so you'll see no data. So it really isn't passing or failing anything because there's just not enough data to show me. Although
let's fix that. Everybody head to brianleejackson.com and then go subscribe to the newsletter.
I think we'll need a substantial more people to register day there. But again, yeah, that's what that looks like. So yeah, just pay attention there, because if you don't have enough data, I mean, still optimize, obviously, because if you're going to get to that data, you want to be optimized already. Okay, so next thing is TTFB. And I stress this so much, even online, in Twitter, X, like I'm always talking about TTFB, and people, I think, just don't give it enough emphasis. But it's literally impacts all these metrics. So, of course, if you haven't, go back to our TTFB presentation where we really dive into some of these, but I want to mention a few of them again, just so that they're in your mind again. Is high quality hosting provider. It's going to have a huge impact on your TTFB right off the bat, without doing anything else. Cache solution in place. So whether it's server level caching, plugin cache, just make sure you have something running. I work on tickets all the time where they actually don't have cache in place, surprisingly. It's a very common thing I see still. Reduce your HTML size. Because if you think about FCP and your requests, that HTML doc request, it has to load the HTML before it can start processing the request. So that's going to be part of your FCP delay. So you want to use lightweight themes if you can. So Generate Press, Cadence blocks, bricks. Those are the three I'm usually recommending. And of course, we work on a lot of Elementor sites too. So like that's fine too. I've seen lots of Elementor sites score perfectly fine. It's usually the other things that they're adding onto the Elementor site that is the problem. But again, the lighter weight you can go, the easier all of these things get. And I'm sure, Kyle, I'm sure you saw that too when you, because I forget, but you made the move to Generate Press a couple years back, and I think you saw a huge difference.
Yeah, immediately.
Yeah. So, PHP version. This is another super easy metric. I think I forgot to mention this in the LCP one. But this is usually just a toggle these days in your hosting provider. So it's like one of the easiest things you can change. Most hosts right now, from tickets that I've just been seeing in the last 2 weeks, are all running PHP 8.1 or sometimes even lower. And some of that is due to compatibility reasons. But if you're using the latest plugins and themes, like we're actually running PHP 8.3 on all of our sites, including our e-commerce sites. So it just gives you an idea here that you might be okay, bumping that to a newer version if you're not on there.
That's probably one of those things you don't want to test live during this webinar and take your website down, maybe on staging for that one.
Exactly, yeah. And if you want to be safe and aren't as technical, I always say do one version behind the latest one. That's usually a good way to just see, like, all the plugins and themes have probably, at that point in time, it's a year and a half old or something, and they've all updated. But a lot of people I see are still running 7.4 or 8.1, whereas we're on 8.3 already. So, and again, I have a link to some Kinsta benchmarks. They do this thing every year where they benchmark each PHP version, and 8.3 is on average 10% faster in processing requests than 8.1. So, again, just a super easy tweak. Check your PHP versions. And then when cache, again, emphasize this. So if you have cache off and turn cache on, I just have two simple speed tests here, examples. But FCP decreased 43% just by enabling cache. So if your cache is not on or it's not configured properly, make sure that's working. Another common thing I see that I didn't mention in the slide is WooCommerce sites will sometimes have these plugins that add cookies that bypass the cache. And sometimes this will start happening over the entire site. So just make sure your cache is working. If you're seeing a large server response time in GTmetrix, like this huge bar at the top there, probably means cache is not working. And it could be like a cookie that's bypassed, and you need to tweak things with the plugin to make sure that cookie doesn't bypass the cache. And then edge cache. So the distance is always a problem when it comes to cache. So I always recommend utilizing Edge Cache if you're serving global visitors. And again, I ran a test in our previous LCP and TTFP presentations, and I think it was Canada and Germany. So I just increased the distance from the server in North America to Germany, and the FCP increased 111% just by moving the distance. So you can fix that. Thankfully, now these days we have Edge Cache, which serves your entire page basically from CDNs. So use Cloudflare. Automatic now has Edge Cache. Lightspeed has their version of with Quick is what they call it. So all of these things are like our Edge Cache solutions now. So definitely check on that. But again, yeah, go through all these things. Those all help FCP. Text compression. So this is something I didn't have in some of the previous presentations because I thought it wasn't a big issue anymore. And then between those presentations and now, I've had at least 15, 20 tickets with this problem. So I don't know what's going on recently. So I decided to include this in this one, is compression. Normally, hosting providers and CDNs will just add the compression headers and you don't see it. So like if you sign up for like Kinsta or Rocket.net, like you probably will never see this warning because they're just applying all this stuff behind the scenes for you. But I've been running into a lot of other hosting providers that are, I guess you could say screwing things up is the easiest way to put it. And or a plugin is that's like on a shared host that they're like somehow not applying compression header to more dynamic files. And so I was working with a client the other day. I don't know if he's watching this, but he was using generate blocks and the dynamic files weren't getting compression headers. Just these two files from generate blocks. And it's not a generate blocks problem. This is a cache host problem. But the host was not putting that header on these files. So they weren't compressed, meaning you can see here in the test I did here, the one file, you could have shaved off 86% of that file by getting compression on there. So you can see how big of a problem this is. And if you don't have this running on literally on anything, it's going to slow things down. So definitely recommend, if you see this warning, I would move that to top priority over anything else we go over here.
And the more time I spend with you talking about all these things, the more and more I realize the value of managed hosting that's doing so much of this stuff for you. Like, yes, it is more expensive, but how expensive is your time tracking this thing down and trying to fix it on your own if your host isn't doing this for you?
Yep. And if you want another tool to like, once in a while, it's always good to not trust PageSpeed Insights 100%. Even I've seen bugs show up in PageSpeed Insights sometimes, and then they'll fix them and they're gone the next week. Whoops. Let me pull this up just so you can see it. This tool here is one. Pull the right one. And I have a link here in the slides here if you want to grab it later. But yep. Gift of Speed is a tool you can run to check gzip broadly compression. So that's one that I like to see. Like if I see it flagging in PageSpeed Insights, I usually will take that URL, dump it in here just to confirm that, like, wow, yeah, this is not getting compressed here.
Well, I like that site because it says my FCP is 0.53 seconds, so it gave me a much better grade. So we're going to go with that for now. Didn't even do anything.
And of course, if you're more technical, you can look at the actual HTTP headers on there to see if like the compression headers are there. But again, that's one of the technical folks. Okay, so now we're going to dive into some of the things that we can do with our Perfmatters plugin. And again, if you were with the LCP presentation, some of this will be a little redundant, but I've tried to sneak in little tips here and there that I forgot or maybe didn't include. So it's not completely the same. So the first thing is minification. And this is just the process of removing unnecessary characters from your code. So like white space, comments, variable names, all this stuff, just basically cleaning up the markup. And we have this now as of recently in our plugin because Cloudflare actually just ended up deprecating this. One of the reasons they deprecated it is because most plugin developers will do this beforehand these days. But again, we still see this all the time. There's usually like a few stragglers sitting out there. So if you have 3 or 4 stragglers, it's still worth it to do the minification at that point if you're trying to fine tune everything.
And that's the minification for both JavaScript and CSS?
Correct. And so here in our Perfmatters plugin, under the JavaScript tab, so we have this minify option. And then under the CSS, we have a minify CSS. So pretty simple. And again, because they're only doing stragglers, like we do have exclusion options here and even filters to fine tune this. But again, because it's only a few files, usually this won't break many things these days. These are pretty safe to turn on. And we're using an open source library that's used by other optimization plugins that's been used for literally like 7-10 years. So it's very stable at this point. And also files with .min or .js or .min.css are automatically skipped. So just the stragglers. Okay, so next we'll go into reduce unused CSS. And we'll bring this up here. And basically this is just plugins will load things everywhere. So this reduces the amount of code that should be loading to what is needed. So we have our reduce unused CSS feature in Perfmatters. And you can toggle that on here. And then we have an inline or a file option. I will mention here that if you're going for scores, inline is probably going to fix more things. Now, the caveat here is that inline will put it in your HTML size. So what do you think that impacts? It impacts your FCP in some way because it's part of that HTML doc. So if you're trying to fine tune FCP and LCP, sometimes it can be better to go with the file version. Although you might see a few more things flag sometimes. So it depends. In my opinion, I'm not as concerned anymore these days with the 100 as I am with optimizing FCP, LCP, those things that are like going to get you, that LCP especially is going to get you to the pass or fail. So again, it matters how much code is on your site, what you're running. If you're on a smaller generate press site, the inline actually might work even better just because all of your code, even in the inline, is probably more optimized than most other sites. Now, if you're running on a super large site with WP Visual Bakery, I don't want to throw them under the bus, but
right,
fortunately I just did. And 25 plugins loading a whole bunch of crap. The inline is probably going to end up dumping a lot of inline CSS. So like in that instance, the file version might actually perform better. So again, test both on your site, like run 5 tests with it off or with it on inline, 5 tests with it on file, and see which metrics do what, and then kind of go from there. There's not really a right or wrong answer there. I just wanted to point out that it can impact the FCP with the inline stuff. And then we have our options here: delay, async, remove. If you're not technical, do not use the remove option. This is very aggressive. And that will take fine tuning on your site. So do not use remove, please. We've even thought about removing that actually and putting it under the advanced option because it takes time to tweak things. Async is kind of in the middle, but you're not going to see as much performance improvement. So we usually almost always say use the delay option, which is the default. And then we, of course, have exclusions. And then if you run into any problems with this, of course, I always say, reach out to us. We're always happy to help. And again, depending on what you're running, sometimes, you might need an exclusion or two to make everything work, exactly how you need it. So, and then in our testing, we saw, this is kind of just some data I pulled from tickets, but we saw an average decrease in FCP of around 15%. Just by using the unused CSS stuff. And again, some of these will also be indirect because if you think about FCP, it's that first element. So a lot of this optimization is not necessarily always impacting that first element, if that makes sense.
Right.
Some of it's going to be indirect, but again, even from my own testing, I've seen this feature just enabling it reduce FCP. So again, even Google, it says, even they have that. I don't know if you can see that very well, but they have this filter, and they're saying that unused CSS will impact FCP. So. Okay, next is unused JS, pretty much almost just like unused CSS. Although this is usually a lot of times with third-party scripts, you'll just have a lot of unused code. And so in Perfmatters, we have our JavaScript, delay JS. The default is only specified scripts where you can specify them. We might end up changing this in the future, although that would end up using a migrator, so it's a little more complicated. But I usually actually recommend using the delay all and then working the other way, like add exclusions if you need them. Unfortunately, I didn't install. Let me just get something on here really quick so you can see.
Yeah, that's one that I've done the same as you're saying here. Like I have it on delay all scripts, and then I'll just exclude the things that I know I need to exclude. And actually your plugin makes it pretty easy because you can kind of just put in like the file name or whatever of what you need to exclude, which makes it great. And then I think you're about to show us some of the built-in quick exclusions that help as well.
Except for I'm stuck in the Elementor wizard doom loop here.
That's funny.
Okay. We go back here, JavaScript. So yeah, I usually recommend, and it's for performance reasons, delay all. And then we have this thing. This is what I wanted to show you. That's why I installed Elementor. Is for a lot of the popular solutions that we're always working with, we will always try to add quick exclusions. You can exclude Elementor, and that will most likely fix pretty much most of the issues that you might see come from delay JS.
So if you toggle that on, the delayed JavaScript, and put it on all scripts, and you see those quick exclusions come up, like in this instance, we're just seeing Elementor because that's all you installed, but other plugins might show you different ones as well. Should we go ahead and just tick those on, or should we leave them off, test everything? Because it'd be better to exclude them or not exclude them if we don't have to, and only exclude them if we're running into issues.
Typically, I would only check them on if you're running into issues. Okay. So for like Elementor, usually you need to check it on. However, if you remember our presentation we did way back when we did an Elementor site optimization, the way you built sites specifically was focused on performance, where you didn't have any dynamic elements really. It was like a very optimized, you built very optimized Elementor sites. And for your site, we actually didn't need any exclusions. So it is possible to get away with that. But again, 95% of the people out there are adding these crazy sliders and animations and all the stuff with Elementor. So a lot of times you just need to check that on. However, another example would be like a WS form or contact form plugin.
Sure.
If you don't check it, it will probably still work fine, but you probably won't see the form load until you actually move your mouse on the contact page. So I would probably still exclude it because I don't think that looks good. But maybe you're fine with that. I don't know. So it depends on, it doesn't necessarily always mean that things are breaking.
Yeah, the form one's funny too, because I have, when the form's above the fold, I hate when it doesn't load until you move your mouse, right? But if the form's further down on the page, somebody's going to move their mouse before they ever see it. So it's probably cool.
Exactly.
So it's kind of case-by-case basis on that.
So if you have a contact page and maybe you have some wording and stuff ahead of the contact page and it's below, like, then you're fine. Then maybe you want to leave it delayed. So it depends. Let's see here. And I wanted to show one other thing here. This is for the technical folks that are debugging this. So if you're not very technical, maybe ignore this part here, but I want to throw this out here because it's very handy for myself and anyone else doing this. Bring this over here. So when you're adding exclusions, you know how a site, you have your JS scripts and then you have your inline JS. So if you're trying to track down these exclusions and something's broken, sometimes it's inline JS remaining that's broken. But how will you know that? We have this little thing here. So I have it in our doc under the delay JS doc. So you can go grab it later here. But if you put these two symbols here and throw them into this excluded from delay, that will actually exclude all of the inline JS. Now we're almost thinking of adding maybe another toggle or some other way under advanced maybe that you can just kind of like test this. I don't know. We haven't figured out a visual way easy to do this yet, but that's very useful for people that are further into the debugging that are being like, I've excluded like the script. Like, why is it still throwing a problem or something? Right. It's probably something with the inline. And this way you can just like jump that in there, be like, that worked. Okay, it's definitely inline. So now I need to go like look at the view, the HTML, and hunt down like usually finding the ID tag of whatever that form is called or plugin is called.
Sure.
And then do it that way. But
definitely not something to just put in there by default. Only use that if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I wanted to throw that out there for anyone that's like wanting to debug faster. I found that actually super helpful. Just be like, okay, it's an inline. Okay, now I go hunt that down. Okay, next is render blocking resources. So most CSS and JS is naturally render blocking. And there are a couple ways you can fix this. So jQuery itself, you probably see flag a lot of the times in your test. Usually this can't be optimized because you can't delay things out of order. And a lot of plugins will hook into jQuery. We're heading away from jQuery, in my opinion, for the newer things. Lots of people are coding things just vanilla JS, which is great because it doesn't require jQuery. But a lot of times jQuery is just something you're going to have to ignore for right now. So first off, we have the remove unused CSS and delay JS, which we just went over. That'll fix the render blocking warnings. And then second, we have our defer JS. And that's here. And again, this is pretty stable. It's not as aggressive as delay and unused CSS. Don't see very many things usually break from this, so it's usually safe to just check on defer JS. And again, by fixing render blocking resources, we're usually impacting the FCP in some way at some granular level. And that's why we're wanting to do it.
Yeah, I've really never run into issues with the deferring the JS. Sometimes with the delaying, like you said, like something's just not loading until you move your mouse or whatever. But with the defer, I've never run into any problems.
Next is the visible fonts. And we went over this in LCP, but I want to go over it again because it's a little complicated. And if you're running into issues here, this is the best way I've found to kind of usually fix it. So modern browsers wait until the font is fully downloaded to display it. That's why it's usually an issue. And it's because it can create a flash known as FOIT and hold up the flash of invisible text. I don't know what that stands for. Hold up the FCP. So a few things you can do is you can host your fonts locally. If you have Google Fonts, so we have this option here. Then you can add swap. Basically makes it go back to a fallback font to the OS level. And again, we have that right here, swap.
And if you haven't used Perfmatters before, it literally is as easy as just toggle that thing if you're using Google Fonts, and it will just automatically bring all those in and load them locally. Like that's all you have to do is press a toggle and hit save.
Yep. And then we have preloading the fonts, which sounds counterintuitive if you're swapping them. But again, these are some of the weird Google quirks that I've just found to work best for performance. And this will force them to basically load as soon as possible, and that'll help fix CLS. I'm not going to go over that again. You can go in our previous presentation where we went over the font stuff more. But preloading is always good. And we have a link in our doc there too, if you want. And then async your fonts can also help too. And again, yeah, link in the doc. So yeah, that'll basically for the fonts. Next is the avoid chaining critical requests. So this is probably one people see all the time and don't really know what it means. Basically, the greater the length of the chains of the requests and the larger the download sizes, the bigger the impact it will have. And of course, this can impact FCP in an indirect way. So the good news is that pretty much everything we just went over is what you need to do to get this warning down. At this point, you probably don't have much left to do to fix things there. But you can, I'll mention something later where you could fine tune this a little bit more. Just want to point that out though, in case people see that warning and they're like, how can I fix this? Next is the network payload sizes. So this is just anything that can impact your FCP at the top. So like FCP, oversized fonts, large external JS. And again, some of these things, you don't know where they're loading in the order. So it's hard to tell sometimes. So that's why you're just trying to optimize everything. And this is going to impact your FCP at some level. And we went over this in LCP as well. So I don't know if I'll go through it too much more, but again, optimizing images, fonts, anything above, think above the fold, like specifically. That's what you're focused on for FCP. And I did want to sneak this in here for the fonts. I want to go a little granular into this because I didn't with LCP. Is Yellow Labs tool. It's a great tool to see how much of a font library is actually being used. So you can see here, I have this Elements Kit font library. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I kind of just did with that screenshot. It's 448 kilobyte file, massive. It's bigger than I think my entire front end of my Perfmatters website, just this one library. And you can see if you run it through Yellow Labs tool, which is free, it's only 6 glyphs out of the 940 glyphs, which are kind of like the symbols, are actually being used. And again, this is just running on the home page. So like it could be a little more on other pages, but
sure,
for the most part, less than 1% of this library is being used on the page that I was testing here, which is just ridiculous. So obviously this is harming performance a lot. So I love using Yellow Labs tool just to see, like, if you're curious about like how much of this library or how much of Font Awesome is actually being used on this site. So great tool.
And Font Awesome seems to be one of those things that plugin developers love to just put in there because it solves the problem of getting all these icons and everything, giving you access to all the icons, but then it's just huge. And now you're using 1% of it, you know?
Yeah, it's very annoying. So many tickets, I'm seeing that it's like 78 kilobytes from Font Awesome. It like haunting me in my dreams because I see it all the time. But yeah, so one way to fix that would be, this next thing is a Font Awesome kit. Again, you might have to do some more jerry-rigging with your theme to be like, does your theme have a way to turn their Font Awesome off? Right. So then you can go add the Font Awesome kit yourself, basically. Lots of them usually do have a way to at least turn it off. So if you can, this is another great way, is a Font Awesome kit. And again, I'm not a big fan of Font Awesome, so I can't remember if the kit is free or not, or if you have to sign up for you'd have to go to their website and check. But a kit is the way you would want to, you choose just all the icons you want in a library. It compiles it for you. And basically then that's what you load across your whole site. So it'll be like 95% smaller than anything that like usually the theme or the plugin will be adding on your site.
And it looks like, I'm looking at the site now, it looks like the kit is kind of freemium. There's some free options, but they're going to host the actual kit. You have to have the pro version in order to self-host it, and a bunch of other options.
Okay. So you do have even a third-party hosted 95% smaller file will be better, free one, than a obviously self-hosted is always better. But yeah, if you can get it down 95%, it doesn't matter where you host it almost.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely look into kits if you're running Font Awesome. And then of course, if you're using like a theme or page builder that lets you add SVG icons individually, or a plugin, like that's one reason I love Generate Blocks, is because it lets me add SVG icons from Font Awesome just manually. You can just copy paste the code. So while I don't always recommend just dumping everything inline, if you're only using the icon once on the whole site, of course, just throw that inline because it's only being used that one time. So, but yeah, super easy to use with tools like that. And other themes and stuff have started to add like SVG custom icons to you. So
it's great too, because a lot of times you can just copy the SVG from Figma and paste it right into the builder. So you can just take your design and paste it right in, which is awesome.
Really? Oh yeah. Yeah. And actually, since we're on that, let me. I'm going to bring up one thing here quick that I wanted to show. Should have put this in the presentation, but I think people will find it useful. So this tool here is one I like to use. It is svgviewer.dev. I'll put this in the slides before I hand it off to you. So this will be in here later. But you can dump, say you have your SVG files in your code. You can take this tool and it's on demand as you edit it. But you can see here, if I click this button, I can optimize it 15%. So click here. It's now less code and it doesn't change the visual at all. So if you're going through and using SVG icons, you can use a tool like this to optimize it before, like take it from Font Awesome, dump it in here, optimize it, strip out all the unnecessary stuff. It's like kind of like minification or image compression type of thing, and then put it in your solution.
Yeah, that's great too, because like I said a second ago, you can copy them out of Figma. I don't think Figma adds much, but I know if you copy them out of Adobe Illustrator, there's just so much stuff added to the SVG from Illustrator that doesn't need to be there, and this will clean that up right away.
Yep. And then lastly here is Google Web Fonts Helper. If you're adding fonts manually, check to see which char sets you're using. I know this is a little technical, but like char sets are used for like different OS languages and stuff around the world. If you're only needing the basic one, you can download just basically the Latin, but the English version, I guess you can say. And you can get the size of the Google font down smaller than what you're perhaps if you're downloading just straight from Google Fonts. Again, you want to look through that test too, and if you're doing stuff with international with different languages too, you might not want to do this. But again, if you're like a US site targeting US users, you might want to look into the Google Fonts Web Helper tool there.
Yeah, 64 KB down to 15 is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and then maybe multiply that by like if you have 4 fonts, like that's a big deal. Okay, so next is defer off-screen images. So you should, of course, always lazy load your images. WordPress core has lazy loading already built in, but again, if you're using our plugin, based on all the other options, it's still better to use like the lazy load in our plugin because we have so many automations that are happening to make sure things are not lazy loaded. And core, I've seen add lazy tags on things below the fold still, unfortunately. So it's still not very accurate. But again, this can have what I call an indirect impact on FCP, like reducing unnecessary data transfer. Because lazy loading is technically, you think about below the fold. That's all it's impacting. But again, I've seen this have an impact on FCP. So some of this stuff is at a really granular level and maybe only impacting it slightly, but always want to lazy load regardless. And yeah, we have that feature in Perfmatters. Images, you can exclude leading images, top to bottom. Then we have iframes, YouTube. And then you can exclude images, set your threshold. This is how big the viewport kind of is. I usually like to use like 300 pixels or so. And then we have a couple other options there too. I won't go into that too much because it doesn't have a huge impact on FCP. But yeah, always lazy load. And then properly sized images. This will impact FCP and LCP. I didn't have this in the LCP presentation, so I thought might as well just sneak it in here then. So I wanted to explain that WordPress does actually crop your images when you upload them in the media library. And actually, maybe it'd be probably good to maybe show that, because I think a lot of people don't realize this is happening, is right here. When you upload something into WordPress core, it crops them into these 3 different sizes. And it does this because it's uses what is called source set, and then displays those based on the device. So like WordPress out of the box core, you upload an image, 3 images, it displays the smallest one for mobile devices. Like that already automatically works, WordPress core, without any changing. However, it doesn't always mean that it's completely accurate down to the pixel. And so that's why sometimes you might see properly sized image warnings, because it might just be like, 30 pixels off could maybe trigger that warning or something.
Sure.
If you do see this a lot, the first thing I do recommend is checking with your theme or page builder to see what they recommend for the media library settings. Sometimes these actually need to be sometimes these actually need to be changed based on what you're running. And then you could fix those properly sized image warnings. So check if you're installing like a new theme or something, like always see if they have recommended media size settings for the thing. If you're changing themes, there's plugins out there. I forget, what is it? Fat Cats or something. I forget what his brand name is, but let me look it up here while we're here. Just
it's to change.
Now that I've said Fat Cats,
right.
People are probably wondering what I'm talking about.
It's to change the re-render all those thumbnail sizes, all the different version sizes, or
correct? Yeah. Let me get it here.
I guess SEO for the words fat cat are just pretty difficult. People already got that one on lockdown.
Oh, actually, yeah. So I'm thinking of these 2 plugins here. So say you're moving themes, and they have a recommended size for your media library, but yours is not matching that, and you want to match that. It means you need to technically go back and fix all of your old images technically. And again, this is a big change. So like always take WordPress backups, all this stuff, because this is literally changing your file structures. But these 2 plugins here, so I don't know why I said Fat Cats. It's Meow, Jordan Meow. I always see cats.
It's cat related.
But Perfect Images and this one might be actually out of date, but I had seen this one used recently. But Regenerate Thumbnails. There might be a newer version of this. You can go search on a repository, but either way, there are plugins that will allow you to regenerate your thumbnails after you update those media library settings. So then that would technically, hopefully, fix the properly sized image warnings. So just keep that in mind. You can fix these warnings without doing anything else plugin related. However, if you want to take it a step further, you can use a service like Short Pixel AI, EWWW, or Optimal to it's basically scales your images on the fly as they're loading type of thing. But again, that is pretty aggressive. I personally don't do that. I rather focus on like using short pixel, just the basic version, or Imagify, like just optimizing my base image and making sure those sizes are as good as possible. And something with like generate press and generate blocks, like it's pretty easy to fix these types of warnings. So
yeah,
that's
every
why,
time I tried
again,
the short pixel AI thing, it ended up hurting my scores because now it was having to get these images from somewhere else, so that ended up not helping me.
Yeah, I only recommend doing that if you've tried everything else, to be honest. Like there is a thing such as like introducing other optimization layers that cause problems, and that's definitely could be one. Okay, and then next is we have our script manager in Perfmatters. This will allow you to disable plugins or scripts on an individual or site-wide basis. And again, this comes back to those critical chain request warnings. Like if you're trying to fine-tune that even more after you've done everything else we went over, maybe something is still loading that technically doesn't need to be there, but it is. You could disable it like just there, and maybe it still needs to load somewhere else. So that's another way to like maybe fine-tune the critical chain request even further. Something doesn't need to necessarily be there.
This is particularly helpful when like you have a plugin that is loading on every page, but you're not actually using it on every page. So you could go in here and tell it where it should load, right? Like if I'm only loading this contact form on the contact page, then don't ever load it anywhere else. Only load it on the contact page.
And another example would be, think of delay JS. Maybe you need to add if you add the exclusion, it's going to add the exclusion across your whole site. If you put it in that box. Now we have filters for all of our features, so you can go add a filter to add an exclusion just on a specific page, if that makes sense. So that exclusion for delay JS is only happening in that spot. However, it might be easier to just go into the script manager and say, I'll just disable it here, if that makes sense. So there's different ways you could approach that based on what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, speculative loading. And again, for anyone that watched LCP, I know this is a lot of some redundant stuff here, but again, they go hand in hand with each other with a lot of this stuff. So pre-connect. So this is something you can do to speed up third-party connections. And again, this kind of an indirect impact on FCP, but it depends on where it's loading in the load order, all this stuff. If we go to Perfmatters here, so you can add like a pre-connect for a domain. So like cdn.domain.com would be like a pre-connect, something you could add. And that'll speed up like third party, basically the request to the third party. Then we have prefetch, which allows you to, and this is through our instant page feature right here in Perfmatters. So basically allows you, when you hover over a link, it prefetches some of the resources required to load in the background, and then it essentially loads the page faster. However, as we went over last time, there is a new plugin from the WordPress team, and I'll bring it up here, that I actually recommend using over our instant page feature. And that is this speculative loading plugin. So this basically uses pre-render, which goes kind of a step further. Now it does take up more server resources, so to keep that in mind. But it will basically renders all of the content other than just part of it. So it will be even faster than prefetch. So I'm actually using this plugin on all of our sites as opposed to instant page. So if anyone's curious, we're kind of waiting to see, since this is a plugin made by the WordPress core team, we're seeing if this gets into core eventually, like we might just drop instant page from our plugin and say like, go use this. For right now, we're kind of in that limbo state where we're leaving instant page in our plugin because prefetch actually has better browser support at the moment for Firefox and things like that. But if you're using only Google, only care about Google mainly, Chrome, and you're trying to fine tune everything as much as possible, Speculative Loading plugin is great. So
I put the link to that in the chat as well if anybody wants to go grab that.
And that's pretty much it. So just go through a bullet point here, list of what we went over. So TTFB, you want to get the server response time down, HTML doc size. Huge impact on FCP, probably more than anything else you could do. See the previous video, which goes into the TTFB, caching, all that fine grained stuff. You want to use a lightweight theme, generate press, cadence. You want to get the FCP under 1.8 seconds or less. Make sure you're using compression on every resource. If you're seeing that flag at all, make sure you go track down what is flagging. You want to minify your JS and CSS. You want to remove unused CSS. Delay unused JSS until it's needed on user interaction. You want to defer your JS to help eliminate render locking resources and avoid the chaining critical requests. Host your fonts locally, add swap, preload them. You want to decrease any large resources, image optimization, fixing large font libraries. Use that Yellow Labs tool to see how much of the library is actually being used. And like the SVG viewer tool to compress or to even get your SVG files smaller. Lazy load images, make sure they're properly sized. And then you can use a tool like our script manager. If you've gone through everything and you're still trying to get rid of things that shouldn't be there, you can use script manager to disable plugins or scripts. And then take advantage of the speculative loading techniques to essentially make those page loads faster on hover, essentially. So, and that's pretty much it. That was a mouthful of a summary, but that's pretty much everything with FCP.
So of this list right here, and if you do want to grab a screenshot, this is probably the best page. If you just listen to all this, grab a screenshot of this, and it's kind of your checklist to work on your FCP going forward. Which of these do you think are like, it's usually 80-20 rule, right? Like a couple of these are going to be responsible for 80% of the change you're going to see. Which one do you think are most important for people to look at first?
TTFB, theme, unused CSS, delay JS.
Okay.
Those are the ones. Everything else, like, minify, even compression, fonts, like all of these things are just going to have minimal impacts, like small impacts. And so the delay JS, unused CSS, theme, TTFB, those are the biggest ones going to have the on FCP.
Excellent
impact.
Now, I've grabbed a couple questions. I think only two that I starred here during our thing. But if there's any questions you've worked on if you've been working on your site as we've been doing this and you got questions, definitely drop them in the chat now, and we'll try to answer a few of those. I've been going along and working on mine at the same time, and I think my biggest problem right now is the user-centric cookie policy thing seems to be still popping up on my report. With the serve static assets with an efficient cache policy. And what I see in there is the user-centric cookie consent thing. So I think that JS is still bothering my score a little bit. But other than that, it's running pretty good.
Yeah, for user-centric, there's one JS file that they preload, meaning there's no plugin that can do anything about that because they're literally forcing that file to load. I don't know if they did that because of optimization plugins or not, but there is one file that user-centric does load manually on purpose.
So when user-centric is on, I have a 1.9 first Contentful Paint. When I turn it off, it goes down to 1.1 just from that one JS file that's in there. And I'm sure, a lot of these plugins end up doing these kinds of things because they're solving their own problem, right? They're getting a bunch of support requests because XYZ isn't working, and they realize like, hey, if we force them to always load this one thing, we could reduce our support burden, or we know our customers will have less problems.
Exactly.
In on the whole, not knowing that the rest of us are out, there's some of us out here trying to really narrow things down using Perfmatters and everything else that it's kind of a pain in the ass for.
Yeah, and for theirs, it makes more sense than others because that's like a cookie legal thing.
Sure.
Like, is it legal to delay the cookie thing until user interacts or not? Like, that's a gray area. I'm not a lawyer, so like, I still think it's fine if it doesn't show until because you can't do anything until you, you move your mouse and then it shows up, essentially. You can't not see it. So I still think it's fine, but like, again, I'm not a lawyer, and they probably would not like that. Like if I was to ask them,
you're going to err on the side of performance, and they're going to err on the side of
exactly.
privacy. So
and the cache warning you're seeing from that is because they don't have long enough cache headers on their request, but it's on their server, so there's nothing you can do about the cache length on their server.
Oh, great. All right. Well, I'll just bitch at them a little bit more, and we'll see if we can get anything done on that. All right, this one is a question I know you've answered before, but not on today's call, so I'm going to make you do it again. Ryan asked, why doesn't Perfmatters have a caching component?
Sure, yeah. So the main reason we don't have caching, and never say never, but the reason we don't have it right now is because most hosts already have cache at this point, or there's already good cache solutions. So like Kinsta, Rocket, WP Engine, Flywheel, Big Scoots, InstaWP. I can keep going down the list. These Cloudways technically too, although they have their own plugin too. But like all of these hosts, even SiteGround, technically they even have their own server level cache, even though they have a plugin too. But all of these hosts have cache already done, and so I'm always on, just like WordPress core. If they do something better, I'd rather have you utilize them. Like, I'm not trying to make people's lives harder. That's why with this instant page pre-render thing, like if they add it to core, I'll gladly tell you just go use core if it's better. Like, even though it's one less thing in our plugin, like, so for cache, it's type of the same thing. We don't want to add a whole nother layer of troubleshooting and redundancy if all the great hosts out there already have a cache solution running. However, with that being said, we realize some hosts don't have cache, but there's already great cache plugins out there. So like WP Fastest Cache, Cache Enabler. If you're using Cloudways or SiteGround, I actually recommend using their cache plugins specifically because they have other layers like Varnish, object caching, and for us to keep up to date with development for all these different hosting layers, you're going to run into more problems than are going to be fixed probably. But again, more hosts keep adding cache solutions too. So like we're getting even less needing a cache solution the further we go out. But again, I realize for some places, for some hosts, it would be nice to have cache in Perfmatters. We do realize that. So never say never, but that's why it's not there at the moment.
Yeah, and one thing I've appreciated about just talking with you about kind of your philosophy on Perfmatters too is you'd rather take some of the features that are in Perfmatters out. Like if you could not have them, that's better, right? And if people have a caching solution that's native to whatever their hosting environment is, then that's probably going to be better for them anyway. So
Correct.
While I think a lot of us like the one-stop shop, like we install this plugin and it does everything we need, that might not be the best option for your actual site, right? Like you could probably do a really good job of caching, but you might not be able to do a better job than every host in every situation, right? So
correct. And I guarantee you, like at SiteGround, I forget, they renamed their plugin recently, but it used to be SG Optimizer. Now it's like Speed Optimizer or something. But like, I guarantee you the developers working on the cache at SiteGround know caching on their system better than I would ever know caching of their system. So there's a reason to sometimes use the plugins at those places that make them themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great question. And then Jackson asked here, I know we're saying we shouldn't really delay or defer jQuery, but is there a way? So I think one of those you do have a toggle in Perfmatters, but it's under the advanced settings, right? Maybe you want to share Perfmatters and show where those are.
Yeah, let's go back in here. So yeah, if you go under Tools in Perfmatters, we'll enable that, Advanced Options, and then we'll go to JavaScript. So we do have our defer here, and then include jQuery. And again, we have a warning too, because sometimes, of course, this can cause problems, but you can defer jQuery. And delay JS does delay jQuery by default. So that it's already delayed unless you like, now if you add like a, oh, I think I'm on an older. There we go. If I click this Elementor one here, that actually has jQuery in the exclusions that we've set for Elementor, if that makes sense. So, but if you don't have any exclusions here, just have delay all. jQuery is delayed on user interaction. So it could be that this person might think we're excluding that and maybe has a quick exclusion enabled for something that needs jQuery. Like that could be one of the reasons. But yeah, we do delay that, and there is a defer option.
So the defer option's hidden behind advanced, and then when you click on the jQuery, it also pops up a warning. So tell us why this one's a little bit more scary.
It's because jQuery, so when it comes to deferral and delaying, the way JavaScript works is it has to load in the same order. If there's inline JS and external scripts, they have to always load in the same order. You can't just delay a script and not delay the inline, or vice versa. Like it needs to load in the same order. Same with defer. So when if you do them out of order, that's what causes things to break or cause console warnings that you see or stuff. So everything has to be kept in the same order. And so that's why we have another warning here when you click that on, just because it is a very aggressive setting. I do know some people that use it. I do work with clients that use that option. But again, it's the more technical folks too.
Excellent. All right. Jackson said, perfect. Thanks. So cool. We solved that one as well. So I don't see any other questions coming in here. I'll give everybody one last shot if they have a question. If not, kind of in between now and then, if anybody has any more questions, let's talk about what's next in this series. I believe we have 2 more episodes to go. And the next one we tentatively have scheduled for the last Friday of this month on the 30th. And that's going to cover CLS, or cumulative layout shift. So tell us kind of what we have in store there.
Yeah, so CLS will be completely different than these previous presentations. I know the LCP and FCP are kind of redundant. And so CLS is going to be a totally different direction as far as things that are shifting on a page. So Google basically, let me see if I have a test here.
Google hates that, and I hate that when things shift around on the page.
Oh yeah, here's I guess that's a good, I have this up here at least. So this one's still in the green, but like in the my presentation, we'll go into some really bad ones, like in the red, like failing, because this is a core Web Vitals metric. So Google is passing or failing you if you have this in the red or green.
Are there certain page builders that have a harder time with this than others?
Yes. I'll just say Divi has a lot of CLS problems. I'll just say it. I'm hoping that, I think they're working on Divi 5, right now.
Right.
Well, they have been for a few years, but I think they're pretty close as far as releasing it. I'm hoping that they fix some of the CLS stuff with Divi 5. I'm sure someone on their team has looked at it, because I'm sure they've gotten lots of tickets that I've sent them.
Right.
The CLS. Because this is where our plugin, an optimization plugin, is not meant to fix CLS. So in this presentation, we're not going to be going into Perfmatters really. We might touch on a few things where it might impact it, but CLS needs to be fixed by the theme or page builder at the root of the source of the code. Now we'll touch on things like sometimes sliders can introduce CLS, all this other stuff, but this has to be fixed at the base, basically, of the code. And so we'll go into stuff like here. You can see a cumulative layout shift. Debugbear has a great way. You can actually go here to their video, and I like to slow it down frame by frame, but you can see that shift right there. That's what it's complaining about. And so and yeah, you can see a screenshot here, that one little shift. And so essentially they want you to fix that. And so we'll go into a couple examples of like failing CLS. Here's what I would do to fix it, how to troubleshoot it, stuff like that is what we'll go over.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to that one already. This one snuck up on me a little bit. Brian wrote me on Monday and said, "Hey, do you got that landing page up for this yet?" No, I'm working on it. So I'll do a better job of making sure to get the word out a little bit sooner on that one, because I know that's going to help out a ton of people. Because that's one of those there too. It's like some of the stuff we talked about today and in the last one was like, well, if you toggle this little thing inside Perfmatters, all your wildest dreams will come true, essentially. And cumulative layout shift is not one of those things. So I think this is going to be a really important one that, if you're having problems or you're seeing that come up in your Cora vital scores, it's definitely going to be helpful.
Yeah. No, I think it'll be extremely useful for folks. Excellent.
All right. So last things before we get out of here, I will say we just had a great comment come up in here. This has been a great series. I agree. Thank you, Brian, for doing this. This is really kind of you to obviously a lot goes into these presentations to put all this information together. So I just want to say again how much we appreciate you doing all this. So let's see. If you don't have Perfmatters and you weren't already convinced, you can go to perfmatters.io and use the code TheAdminBar, and that will save you 20% on that. If you learned something in this, if you enjoyed the stream, hit thumbs up. I'd appreciate that. That'd be very nice. Like I said, go subscribe to Brian's newsletter. You can get to that at brianleejackson.com, and keep an eye out on the announcement for our next webinar. I'll probably post about it on the 16th, which is 2 weeks from now, and then we'll have the webinar again on the 30th. So I think we have that one scheduled for the same time of day as this one, but in about 4 weeks from now. So we'll do it all again.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Well, Brian, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for doing this. And I found out the one thing I need to still fix here on this site in order to get my score a little bit better. So I have to go bitch at somebody else now.
Well, yeah. No, I hope people find it helpful. And we'll go over CLS next. I think that'll be extremely useful for people because from my interaction with people and tickets, CLS is always one of those things they literally have no clue where to begin, even to start fixing it. So I think we'll go through. My chore will be actually finding and documenting some great examples over the next 4 weeks.
Okay.
And a lot of this stuff is compiled from tickets. So that's what over the next 4 weeks, I'll be collecting CLS failures and putting them together.
Would it be helpful if anybody's watching this and they're having CLS issues? Do you want to have them email me and I'll curate some of those for you? Would that be helpful?
Sure. Or you can email us. Yeah. Okay. Either way. Or yeah. But yeah, if you're failing if your CLS is in the red at the moment, sure, send it on over.
Yeah. Take a look. Give us some good case studies to look at and see what we can do.
Yeah. And always feel free to email us if you have problems with Perfmatters. Being Friday, I would prefer the emails on Monday just because this has been a really busy week. But we'll always get back to you, and I think Kyle can attest to that. We're super fast with support. Like we close out support tickets same day unless there's a development issue. So
yes, I will agree with that. The best in the biz, the gold standard for support goes to Perfmatters. I've said it many times before, so there's no doubt about that.
That's something I pride myself on.
And documentation, like everything in Perfmatters has a tooltip, and if you click on it, it will take you to more information than you ever want to know about whatever that thing is. So that's very appreciated as well.
Oh yeah, I hope that helps. I wish I had more time to write documentation. There's a lot of docs I have in the queue, but don't have time to write them.
You are a sick man if you wish you had more time to write documentation, but we appreciate you for it.
I actually enjoy that part of it.
Well, sweet. Well, thanks again, Brian. I really appreciate this. Have an awesome weekend, and we'll do this again here in a few weeks. And everybody that was watching, hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. And keep an eye out for when we post out the next one, episode number 4 on CLS, and we'll see you guys there. All right. Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye.